always number one reason, fundamental reason a business is not realizing its growth potential, it's because the business and its target market somewhere are misaligned. And if you think about a mechanical watch and you misalign the gears, the mechanical watch may still be working, but it will eventually slow down and one day maybe stop ticking. And in a way, the business is the same. If you misalign the business with your target market, then you're slowing down. You're not realizing your growth potential. And maybe one day the company is going to die or the clock's going to stop ticking. So it's really a matter of alignment between the business and its target market.
I'm Felicia Shakiba, and this is CPO Playbook, where we solve a business challenge in every episode. Every CEO feels the same pressure on Monday at 8 a.m. Should we be growing faster? Why aren't we? But according to Dr. Philippe Bouissou, Apple alum, growth strategist and board member, the real reason companies stall has nothing to do with sales, marketing, or product silos. He believes it comes down to a single root cause: alignment. Today, he teaches us what that actually means and how any CEO can diagnose and engineer growth on demand. So, Dr. Bouissou, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Felicia. It's a pleasure being on your show.
Well, before we dive into your incredible framework, can you take us back to your earlier experiences from your time at Apple to maybe the boards you've served on and how those experiences shape the way you think about growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually think that what I've learned over the years is that growth is the most fundamental way to create value. And just to clarify, when I talk about growth, I'm talking about top-line revenue growth versus the growth of the market in which the business is operating, right? Because if you are growing at 20% in a market that's growing at 50%, that's not good. You're losing market share, so you're certainly not creating value. And if you're growing at 5% in a market that's decreasing at 20%, then you're creating significant value. And so what I learned at Apple and the 25 boards that I've served on, including the 2 now, is that you have to be obsessed about top-line revenue growth, again, compared to your market growth. And what have really been puzzling me for many, many years is, what do I do as a CEO or as an entrepreneur on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow the business? A very, very deceptively simple question. It's a little bit like saying, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to be a good parent? And it's like you don't really know where to start. But that's really what I've been obsessed about for many years, and trying to bring a clear answer to that deceptively simple question.
And you've said that most important question every CEO must answer is, why aren't we growing faster?
Well, what I realized, and the big epiphany and discovery I made some years ago, was that the always number one reason, fundamental reason a business is not realizing its growth potential, it's because the business and its target market somewhere are misaligned. And if you think about a mechanical watch and you misalign the gears, the mechanical watch may still be working, but it will eventually slow down and one day maybe stop ticking. And in a way, the business is the same. If you misalign the business with your target market, then you're slowing down. You're not realizing your growth potential. And maybe one day the company is going to die or the clock's going to stop ticking. So it's really a matter of alignment between the business and its target market.
And you talk about growth as this alignment problem at its core, right? So first of all, what led you to that discovery? And how did you realize that alignment was that missing variable?
You know, it really hit me one day. It wasn't like a slow moving process. I realized that the companies that I was involved with that were not growing as fast as they could, when I was really listening to the problems and the challenges that they had, I realized that it was all about misalignment. And so I kind of stepped back from that and I asked myself, well, could misalignment be the core reason why the business is not growing? And the answer, much to my surprise, was yes, that's indeed the case. But it was kind of a discovery that happened pretty quickly over 20 years.
Quickly over 20 years. I'm just curious, out of your experience at Apple, obviously Apple was very fast moving. It's still very fast moving. It's one of the most impressive companies today. Where did they get it right, or where did they get it wrong? How did you see it while you were there?
I guess Apple is really well in general, not always, but in general, really well aligned with its target market. The company understands fundamentally who the customers are. They understand that they are not in the business of building hardware product. They are in the business of delivering unprecedented and amazing experience, because that's what customers really buy at the end of the day. It's not about the iPhone, it's about the experience. And then all the facets of the business, whether it's market facing or internal, are obsessed and are well crafted along realizing those alignments. And that's why the company is so successful, because it is truly, really well aligned with its target market.
Okay, so what does it actually look like, and how does it show up in the business? Can you walk us through the first dimension of alignment that you discovered?
Yeah. So they are the other big discovery I made was that they are actually 4 market-facing vectors or dimensions, if you will, of alignment. Because then the next question is, well, what does it really mean for me as a business or for my business to be aligned with my target market? And I realized that there are 4 fundamental axes of alignment. And the stunning fact is that those axes of alignment are absolutely universal. I do not know any business who doesn't have to comply to those 4 laws of alignment, if you will. And it doesn't matter how big the business is, where it's functioning, the business model, whether you're selling a product or a service, the pricing model, all that is irrelevant. Those 4 fundamental axes of alignment are truly universal. And so the first one is the alignment between the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes to address that pain. So let's say you have a headache and I show you a stomachache pill. Well, your pain and my claim are not aligned. You will never buy my product, and nor should you. So the fundamental question of what pain am I addressing, who has that pain, which defines the market, the target market, and then what claim am I putting against that pain, and are those 2 things aligned? That's the very first dimension and the very first axis of alignment.
And once CEOs understand that first dimension of the pain, and I will say that sometimes people don't ever really get there, right? To truly understand what that pain is. So there's already I think the number of people or founders or CEOs that can get that right are even fewer, right? But what is the next layer of alignment that they should diagnose? And how does that show up in real organizations?
Yeah. So the second alignment is the alignment between the perception, which is how a prospect understands the claim, and the messaging, which is how I express my claim as a business. So if I go back to this analogy of the pill for your headache, let's assume that I describe it to you in Korean. I'm assuming you don't speak Korean.
I don't.
Even though it's the perfect product for your headache, you will never buy it because you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? I do not understand. So if I express my claim in a language or in a way that you don't understand, even though it would be the perfect product where the pain and claim are aligned, you will never buy it because you don't understand. Your perception of what the claim is not there, and therefore the transaction is not going to happen.
We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Tim Boris, host of the Working Well podcast, where business strategy meets human sustainability. If you're an executive, a leader, or change maker ready to ditch burnout, build thriving teams, and drive real results, this is your next must listen. Tune in on the Work Defined Network or at timboris.com/podcast.
Back to the show. Absolutely. And I would 100% agree, because even if you can understand the pain really well. And Korean, I think, obviously, that is giving us like a clear picture of how that miscommunication happens, but you can speak in clear English to a customer and they still might not get it.
Yeah.
Truly understanding like what that language, speaking the customer language.
Well,
right?
exactly. And it's not just the language, it's the lingo and the way you talk. So I give you an example. I'm a skydiver. I've done 1,000 jumps. If you were to come to me and you try to sell me a gear, right, a skydiving parachute, and you use words that we don't use in the skydiving community. So for example, 0P, which means zero porosity, is a term that we use all the time for a wing. It's like, I will immediately figure out that you have no idea what you're talking about. You've never skydived. You have no idea. There's no way I'm going to buy whatever you're trying to sell. In fact, I'm going to shut down and I'm not going to even listen. So it's not just it's just not the English or the sentences, it's the vocabulary, the construct, the narrative, the way people talk. You have to align the way you speak with the way people are used to speaking regarding their pain, and that's really critical.
That's really interesting because I didn't think about that before, but now that you brought it up, that makes complete sense because you can still, I think there is a perception of, you have to be able to know the pain, have the right product for that pain, right? But also be able to present it in a way that convinces your customer that you have the credibility and the knowledge to actually solve their problem.
Yeah,
right?
You have to speak the same language. You have to speak their language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so great. So now then there's a third dimension that you teach that often surprises leaders. So can you unpack that and why misalignment there can silently kill
so the third dimension is the alignment between the way customers want to buy and acquire the product or the service and the way that product or service is sold in the marketplace. It's all about frictionless transaction. Right now I've decided to buy, and if I have to jump through many hoops and it's a pain, it's like, I'm not going to buy the product. So again, if I use this analogy of the headache and the pill, if I said, Felicia, I have the right pill for your headache, but you have to fly to Seattle to get it. You're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm here in the Bay Area. Why can't I just walk to the next pharmacy in my town and just buy the pill? And so it's very important for the company to understand how customers want to acquire and buy the product, to take possession of that product and align with this. So another example is if you're the federal government and I'm trying to sell you a piece of equipment or a piece of software, the federal government has a very well-defined process to acquire. They have procurement, they have all kinds of legal contracts. And if you were to not comply to that, then they will never buy the product because that's not the way the federal government does business. So that's very important axis of alignment, which is making the transaction as frictionless as possible.
Yes, I would agree to that for sure. That also includes pricing, right?
Pricing is part of the first axis of alignment. Pricing is part of the claim.
I see.
And let me give you an example. If you want to fly today from San Francisco to Paris, you can take the Air France flight, which is, let's say, $1,500, and you spend 10 hours sitting on the plane. If I come to you with a claim, I said, you can now fly safely, same safety level, from San Francisco to Paris in 2 hours. Would you be interested? Well, the answer is yes, obviously, right? If you can spend 2 hours versus 10 and it's as safe, of course. But now if I said, well, the ticket cost $127,000, you're going to say, well, maybe not. If I said the ticket is 25% more expensive than the Air France normal flight, you're like 25% for 2 hours instead of 10. That's a bargain. I want to do it. So when I make the claim to you, which is you can fly from San Francisco to Paris in 2 hours instead of 10 with the same safety level, that claim is not a claim because there is no pricing. A claim without pricing is not a claim. It's just a wishful thinking or whatever you want to call it. So pricing is really part of the claim. It's part of the first alignment.
I see.
Now,
okay.
which is now you want to buy the ticket from me. And I said, well, you have to come here. I'm going to print the ticket and I'm going to FedEx it to you. And it's going to take 3 weeks. It's like, that's not the way I want to buy it.
Oh my gosh, send me a DocuSign.
I have it on my phone, right?
All right. So there's one final alignment dimension that came out of your time working with Steve Jobs. Can you explain what that is and why it's so powerful for creating sustainable growth?
Right. So the last axis of alignment, and again, those are market-facing axis of alignment, is actually my favorite one. And I have to confess that I stole it out of the Apple playbook. So working for Steve, I learned a tremendous amount of lessons and really opened my eyes to all kinds of things that I probably would have never thought about if I had not worked with him. But one of the lessons I learned, and it's quite interesting because I actually learned that lesson after I left Apple, not while I was there. I realized that there is only one business on this planet. What I realized is that everybody is in the exact same unique business. So there is no notion that there is, 155,000 different of businesses. And if you're a dentist, if you're an airline like American Airlines, if you're a bank like Wells Fargo, if you're McKinsey, everybody is in the exact same unique business. And that business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight, right? That's the business everybody is in. You have to delight your customers. Same business. So the last axis of alignment is what is the expected delight that the customer has after acquiring the product and before starting the consumption cycle of that product? And is that expected delight what am I delivering to that customer? That's what the alignment needs to be. So now, again, to conclude using the headache analogy, now you're convinced to buy the pill. It's easy. You acquire the pill, you swallow it, and after 20 minutes, your headache is worse. You feel dizzy and you have a rash on your skin. Well, obviously, that's not what you expected, right? You expected like after 20 minutes, your headache will be gone and you would go on with your daily routine. So the last axis of alignment is really important, is aligning the expected delight with what is actually delivered to that customer. And that's a critical one.
And are they walking away, with that feeling, right? Delight.
Yeah. I mean, if they are delighted, then the alignment is there. So I give you another example. I eat in a restaurant. Let's say I eat in a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris. And let's say I eat at McDonald's. Mm-hmm. I can easily argue that it's the exact same product. At the end of the day, you're putting food in your stomach. There's really no difference. Now, as I walk through the door of the 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris, and as I walk through the doors of McDonald's, my expected delight is vastly different, right? So as I consume that meal, I expect McDonald's to be quick, to be, cheap, I'd be in and out. Where my 3-star Michelin restaurant that's going to cost $2,200 is like, I don't have the same expectation. So Same product, really, but completely different, vastly different expectations, vastly different pricing, vastly different experiences.
Right. And I think that Apple does a great job of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why, because there's those surprise moments when you first saw the iPhone, and I'm sure I remember the day it happened because I was so delighted.
Right, exactly.
And I am an iPhone user, and I'm proud to say that. But I think that a lot of times, when you may not be selling a delightful iPhone, right? You might be selling
an experience. Again, Apple is in the experience business. Mm-hmm. And Apple is obsessed. People don't realize that, but Apple is obsessed about every single little detail. For example, when you open an iPhone, the way you actually have to figure out how to get rid of the plastic shrink wrap, people spend a lot of time just thinking about that problem. If you open a brand new iPhone, it smells a particular way. That's not by accident, right? There's olfactic engineering at Apple that figures out what is the best smell for a product like this. And women and men have very different perception of smells, which is a problem that the auto industry has known for a long time. because they never know who's going to buy the car. So every single detail is very, very well thought out and analyzed at Apple, so that are we contributing to the best possible experience we can deliver to our customers? And that's true for everything. You go into an Apple store, the cashier comes to you. You don't have to walk and wait in line to pay. The cashier comes to you. It's completely a reverse experience. And there is a million of examples like this, a million of details that people never think about, but it's very well engineered at Apple. And that's why the company is so successful.
When you apply all 4 dimensions to a company, what typically becomes clear that wasn't obvious before?
There's nothing that becomes clear. So I think the best analogy I can use is a doctor. And I think the question you're asking is, when you have done the diagnostic of what's the problem, that the health issue that the person has, what becomes clear? I mean, it really depends. If it's a COVID case or a stage 3 lung cancer or a broken arm, it's very, very different. What I can tell you is that we never presume and we never know exactly what the misalignment is until we do our work. But I guarantee there is a misalignment somewhere, and we have to find it, and we have to find the right growth playbook to rectify that alignment. Yeah, I just to add, I got asked this question a lot of those 4 axes of alignment, which one is the most important and which one should I focus on, right? I hear this question all the time. And my answer is always the same. He said, okay, you have 2 lungs, you have a heart, you have a brain, you have a liver, you have a stomach, you have all kinds of organs. Which one is the most important to you? Right? And it's exactly the same thing. You have to align along those 4 axes of alignment. The company will lose its growth and will not grow and fail if there is any misalignment along any of those 4 axes.
Right. It's almost like a bridge.
Yeah.
Like if any part of the bridge breaks, you're not going to make it.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct,
yeah. I mean, I'd have to agree, because that is like the start and finish, right? You can't just drop in the middle.
Yeah. Now I just want to add one thing. The bridge is actually longer than most people think. And what I mean by that is that the 4 market facing alignments that we talked about, that we just described, there are 2 other fundamental alignments that are as critical. One is the internal alignment. If the team is not internally aligned, then the execution of the 4 market-facing alignments will fail and the company will not grow.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a team that understands what those 4 market-facing alignments are and that will work well together as a symphony orchestra so that they can execute those 4 alignments. So that's the 5th alignment. And then I realized not too long ago, actually, that there is a 6th alignment, which is really important. Doesn't apply to all companies, but it applies to many companies we work with, which is the alignment between the CEO and the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And the alignment among the board of directors members as well. So that has nothing to do with the 4 market-facing alignments. It has nothing to do with the internal alignment, but it is really, really critical. And I've seen company fails because there was not a good alignment between the CEO and the board. And that's all a vast topic in itself, obviously.
We'll be right back. Back to the show. No, I think that makes sense, right? It's like the tail and the head, right, of that alignment. So for CEOs that might be listening to this episode, what's the very first sign that their business is out of alignment?
Well, there's only one, which is they're not growing. They're losing their momentum in growth, right? So that's the symptoms. The same way I don't feel well today. I need to see a doctor. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I know that I don't feel well. So if a company is not growing as fast as they want, or is not executing the growth plan, or they are losing momentum, I call that the S curve. They grow really fast and then they kind of plateau and they need to restart that growth engine. That's the symptoms. That I guarantee there's a misalignment somewhere. And then the job of the CEO and the management team is to figure out which one of those 4+2 axes is misaligned and then rectify those misalignments.
And what should they diagnose first, or like how do they go about figuring that out?
Well, the order is the order that of the 4 axes. So the very first layer of business is the pain and claim, because if you don't have that alignment, then anything else doesn't matter, because you don't know how you're going to go to market, and you don't know, whether you don't know what delight they expected, because you don't have a claim. And we talked a little bit about pricing. Pricing optimization, I think, is the most difficult part. Is how do you ensure that your pricing is optimized? And the alignment here is between the amount of money and the mechanism of payment, or the procurement and the T's and C's, if you will. That has to be aligned with the value that's perceived by the customer. So that's another micro alignment within the first one, which is my pricing aligned with the value that's perceived by the customer? And if not, I'm either overpriced or underpriced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If a founder wakes up Monday morning feeling overwhelmed, flat growth, investor pressure, internal finger pointing, the normal, what's the simplest first step that they can take to begin realigning?
They got to call me, and they can call us, and we'll help them. I think the first step is to get together with the team on an offsite meeting or day-long meeting outside the office, if possible, and say, okay, do we all agree what pain we're addressing, and who has that pain? So the who has that pain defines the ICP and the target market. They have to maybe they spend 3 days, but they have to walk away, everybody agreeing that says that's exactly the claim we address and the claim we're making, and that's exactly the pain we address. And then they go to the second axis and the third one and the fourth one. And then what is the processes and communications and tools that we need to be aligning? So the very prescriptive way to think about it is you just follow the order: pain and claim, and then messaging versus perception, and then sales versus purchase, and so on and so forth. That's really the way you need to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say are some of the struggles or challenges that you find that's very common with the CEOs that you might work with in your world? Like, what are they struggling with the most? What's on their mind?
Well, their mind is that they want to grow, right? I mean,
Right.
that's their number one struggle. They wake up in the morning and say, what do I need to do to grow faster? What is really interesting is that most CEO and executive teams and boards that we work with have the wrong sense of why they are misaligned. They always have an idea, right? Because I asked them, I said, what do you think you're misaligned? And they would tell us, and we write it down. And then we do the whole exercise, and we realize that they were completely off, right? Their idea of where they are misaligned. It's like me, I'm not a doctor, but I have a toothache. I think I have a problem with my tooth. I'm guaranteeing you. Well, I see the doctor looks at my teeth and he said, everything is fine. And oh, by the way, let me look at your ear. You have a massive infection in your ear canal. So what we see is that we usually don't pay, we write it down for chuckles, and we actually go back at the end of the project. We write down and say, remember, you told us that you were misaligned there, but our diagnostic shows that's not at all the issue. And the reason we know is because we run through an exercise that we call the market truth. It really doesn't matter too much what the team thinks. What matters to us is what does the market really thinks. And we spend a lot of time doing interviews of customers, whether they are lost customers or current customers, and prospects, whether they are current prospects or lost prospects. And we talk to them as a conversation. It's not an online survey, which I don't believe ever works. And we say, look, let's say I'm talking to a lost prospect. I said, Jack, you didn't buy the product. I don't work for the company. I know you made the right decision. You're a smart guy. You made the right decision. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't work for the company. But I just have a question. Why didn't you buy? We gather, and we do this in a statistically relevant way. We're very careful in the methodology that we use. And then we go back to the CEO and said, they don't buy your product because they don't like the color green that your products have. And the CEO was telling us, well, they don't buy our product because we're too expensive. And so that's what I mean by the market truth. We have, and it has to be done by a third party. There's no way the company can do that themselves, because if me asking, what do you think of your baby? Well, I have the best baby in the world. So we do a lot of market truth.
I've worked with leaders and I've asked similar questions, and I said, what is the block for performing, you performing, the team performing, the company's performance? And I've heard them say, well, the customer's wrong. I said, I said, okay, explain that to me. He's like, yeah, they don't, they're wrong. They should be having this product and they're asking for this product. And I said, hey, let's revisit that, let's think about that conversation. That's a longer conversation, but I think it's very interesting how that misalignment could be it just can get carried away, right? Because you think, I'm in this business. I've been in this business for 20, 30, however many years. I know what I'm talking about. I've seen more businesses like you. No, you, the customer is wrong. I'm telling you what you should buy, right? And they could essentially be correct, but if they're trying to sell the product and they're not truly understand, and you probably know this better than I do, but like my thought is that if the market is telling them that they want X, Y, and Z, or maybe it's that perception, right? That's misaligned of like not being able to communicate, how the business's knowledge and expertise can be leveraged, right? So, but I have heard that.
Yeah, the analogy is that a patient comes into the doctor's office and he says, I have a headache. I have a terrible headache. And the doctor says, no, you don't. You have a stomach. I was like, based on what? So it's exactly the same thing when somebody says the customer is wrong. It's exactly like the doctor saying, no, you don't have a headache, and pushing back. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me just play devil's advocate for a second for those who have like had this particular challenge, right? Like I'm an expert. I know what my customer needs. My customer doesn't have the experience to ask, for what they truly need. How would you coach that scenario?
That's a different situation, right? One is, I'm not arguing with your pain. If you say I have a headache and I'm the doctor, it's like, okay, I have to work on this. I'm not going to question you.
Mm-hmm.
What you may say is, look, I have a headache. I just need to drink a lot of water and it's going to go away. That's what I need. And no, that would be the wrong claim. So my job is to convince you that drinking water is not going to help you, but taking an aspirin is going to help you. Right? Okay. So the customer may be wrong about how to solve the problem, and usually they are.
Right.
But they're never wrong about expressing their pain and their problem. That you cannot argue with.
Agreed. Yeah.
So to me, it's different things.
I think what you had just said, which was, which we hear a lot, which is falling in love with the problem. I think more leaders, would benefit from truly understanding how to articulate their customer problem,
right?
Even more so than how to articulate the solution.
Right. So I call that exacerbating the pain. So when somebody comes to me with a pain, first of all, I say it back to him. I said, I think I heard that you have a headache. Is that right?
Right.
And then we push on that button and I want to hear how loud they're going to cry. Right. And to go back to my analogy about the tooth and the eardrum infection is that if you touch, the ear, you may not feel anything. If you touch the jaw, you may not feel anything. But now I'm touching the ear and suddenly it triggers the pain. So you're right. You have to really be able to understand and listen to the pain carefully and then repeat it back. And then actually, if there's a button that you can push on the button in a gentle way, obviously.
Right.
But that really, I call that pain confirmation. You really have to make sure that this is the pain. And now you have a good framework. You understand the pain and you can then see whether your claim is aligned with that pain or not.
Yeah. Well, I think I truly understand this alignment theory that you have incredibly unveiled and uncovered for us in this conversation. Is there any other lasting advice that you have for leaders listening?
No, I think people tend to complicate things, way overcomplicate things. And, we traffic in common sense at Blue Dot. It's like, we really want to understand what's going on and simplify things. And that's why I like those 4 axes, because they are independent. You can fix one without taking the risk of breaking something else. And in a way that's a very simple framework, which is very obvious to everybody who listens to it. But again, it took me a long time to figure out. And then the next step is measuring those coefficients of alignment between 0 and 100%. And that's where we build a lot of tools and invested in a lot of software development and IP. Because if you don't have the X-ray machine, it's very hard to diagnose, a fracture on the bone. And so we need to have those machineries and those tools. And we've been developing them for 11 years, and that's really helpful for us. Otherwise, we can tell by just looking at the CE, say, oh, you have a fracture on that particular bone. It's like, well, how do you know? So that's the tricky part, is not so much understanding the alignment, is how do you measure and how do you double click on really understanding where the specific things are misaligned so that you can fix them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bouissou.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being on your show.
Visit us at cpoplaybook.com. Your support as a subscriber means the world to us, so thank you for tuning in. I'm Felicia Shakiba. Let's connect on LinkedIn.